This is WVBN from around the world. From the League of Nations Case Neighborhood Framework. The general trend of world affairs was lending itself to cooperation and collaboration against the inhuman threat. Gentle suggestions of a ceasefire in Poland were brushed off, but there was the faintest flicker of a more unified response than there had been since the Great War. Newspapers and periodicals worldwide were already stationing correspondents in Geneva as it appeared the crux of the Morgana War might be decided there. And there was no doubt that a new kind of internationalism was on the rise in the imaginations of those that wished to give something to the fight. In Italy, navigando verso Bisanzio. The Regia Marina had tamed the Red Sea and made the waters of the eastern Mediterranean as safe for shipping as anywhere else in the world. And this week they moved to reduce the threat in the Black Sea, offering the Turks assistance beyond that which the British or the Soviets had been able to provide. It was a strategic and diplomatic win, dramatically reducing the odds that the Morganas could force the Dardanelles again, and imperil this new Pax Italiana. These actions, fought on either side of the strait, secured the goodwill of the Turks and the League of Nations, and much of the wider world beyond. The Palazzo Venezia saw a good deal of military traffic consequently. Orders are now flowing day and night. Mussolini has been effusive in his praise of the naval arm of Italy. His rhetoric has grown to match as well. Tragically, the campaigns of the Regia Marina left the Ligurian Sea inadequately defended against an unexpected Morgana force that had previously contended itself terrorizing the coast of French Tunisia. Genoa was raided, and as yet unknown casualties. It is rumored that hundreds may have died or been captured, perhaps 1,000 more. The people of Liguria found themselves wondering why their increasingly famous navy was looking for publicity thousands of kilometers from home. The Regia Marina protested that they expected more help from the Marine Nationale than they got, but that hardly seemed to help their case at home. From the United States Arsenal of Democracy. This week, the United States suffered a heartbreaking attack, and then, when things seemed darkest, won a heroic victory. Morganas had been shy around Hawaii, but this week they fell upon Honolulu Harbor in a disorganized attack. Their assault was broken up by shore guns. They did not display any formation tactics, but they did spend 5 minutes in range of the city. It was a horrifying and indiscriminate attack against a civilian population that left hundreds dead. And slowly, more and more Morganas began to appear in the area, perhaps sensing soft targets. 2 days later, Morganas from the French Antilles went on a rampage near Florida, and that led to a very different outcome. The Battle of the Keys was victory on a scale beyond even the Battle of Belle Harbor. 3 Morgana battleships and 2 aircraft carriers were destroyed, and half a dozen destroyers were forced to flee, only to be hunted down days later near Cuba. The American people had been desperate for a victory, and the Roosevelt administration let them know that they'd had a big one. Navy recruitment had another surge, and Morgana traffic of the southeastern coast declined to a fraction of what it had been. Meanwhile, the Panama Conference began, with the United States and its southern neighbors, and peripherally and unexpectedly Japan, discussing how peace and prosperity outside of Europe could best be safeguarded. From the United Kingdom, an empire if we can keep it. The British turned the might of the Royal Navy toward the cause of relieving the coast of India this week to dramatic effect. Morgana groups that had rampaged, almost unimpeded, between Bombay and Goa were duly eradicated. The Navy delivered a much-needed relief to the coastal cities themselves. This kindness would be remembered. The Indian Ocean remained dangerous and difficult, however, and the maintenance of the coast would not be an easy task. Many of the people of India that have maintained doubts about Prime Minister Chamberlain and the powers that were in London, but those that had lost and sought to avenge the fallen rushed to join the Royal Navy wherever they pulled into port. At home, reports in the fisheries were that the Germans were once again moving freely in the North Sea, and for the first time a German scout aircraft was shot down just north of the Fisher Bank. If the Germans have an easy transit of the North Sea, how long could it be before Scarborough is raided again? Worse, mine-laying efforts were complicated over and over again by seemingly suicidal Morgana attacks. In France, the alliance is tested. This week, the Marine Nationale won a decisive battle against a superior Morgana force within sight of the Estuaire de la Gironde, and photographs of the famous Tour de Cordon, standing intact and proud in front of a seascape full of broken and burning enemy ships, became instant rallying symbols for all of France. Naval recruitment has already soared. If Morgana warships are now less visible in the Bay of Biscay, though, early indications suggest that submarines, particularly asphyxiation, seem to be attempting to fill the void. But they're not yet present in enough numbers to reduce the importance of this great victory. On land, the French had a quieter, more complicated week. The French Communist Party was banned, despite their pleas for a common front against the Morganas following Soviet actions in Poland. Plans for a second Tsar offensive were shelved. They were deemed too impractical and too unlikely to succeed, and the Germans seemed to know it. In Germany, Eisen und Blut. Two Morgana fleets, one in the Baltic and one in the North Sea, came ravening out of the mists, aircraft amassing into a bombing campaign that might have turned Kiel into another Warsaw. The Kriegsmarine fought and took a hard-won victory over in the Baltic, and then, under the threat of enemy aircraft, made the transit of the canal in time to defeat the Morganas attacking from the North Sea. The maneuver is so stunning it captured the imagination of the nations. The Belle of Schleswig-Holstein publicized the victory and the unflinching courage of the citizens of perhaps her most beloved city, and she joined hand in hand with the League of Nations to ask for the support of the entire world in reconstruction and in giving aid to the displaced. The Kriegsmarine focus on securing its home waters, rather than pressing the war in Poland, gave hope to the Netherlands for assistance and cooperation in the future. In Poland, soldiers of the Wehrmacht, bogged down against unexpectedly stiff resistance and without security forces on the rivers, were from all accounts less impressed. The same seems to have been true of their generals as well. For all that, though, the Luftwaffe was bombing Warsaw, and with the army poised in the western part of the city, it seemed that the only question was where Berlin and Moscow would draw the final borders of whatever would replace the Republic of Poland. In Japan, the oil must flow. This week, Vice Minister Kishi was dispatched to Washington, pausing in Panama City to have a series of informal but meaningful discussions with Mr. Wells at the Panama Conference. No formal deals were made, but the Roosevelt administration signaled that it would not let Japan go without fuel in the weeks ahead. Further agreements about trade protection require elaboration by naval staff. The question of Japan's role in China, however, continues to hang like a pall over the proceedings. Unfortunately, that was not the story that dominated the news in Japan this week. A Morgana fleet, battleships all, turned their attention towards Tokyo Bay. Though weeks of preparation and increased investment in coastal defenses prevented catastrophic loss of life, the Morgana shelled the city and started numerous fires. The Imperial Palace was under their guns during most of the action and struck by a dud shell. It would only be through the energy and action of an army officer that the shell was safely defused. The threat to the Emperor was used as proof that the Navy was too disorganized and incompetent to properly do their job, and that perhaps the recent setbacks in Manchukuo and China should be understood in that light. From the Soviet Union, the object of terror. This week, the Morganas in the Arctic Circle, feared to be the densest concentration of the enemy on Earth, launched a major raid into the White Sea for supplies and perhaps simply to spread terror. The Northern Fleet at Polyarny turned them back. Mines and submarines and nightly torpedo raids shattered the enemy's formation, enabling the larger Morganas to be destroyed one by one. The Battle of Archangels was an unprecedented triumph, and as naval resources could not transit the White Sea Canal in time, the Northern Fleet was covered in glory. The Arctic was a little bit safer as a result. The Soviet invasion of Poland overran the lightly defended border as expected. They took Lviv, they won the Battle of Husin and the Battle of Yalpol. Without interference from riverine Morganas, they might have joined the siege of Warsaw from the east. Instead, they entrenched and maintained their strength. Poland would stand another week. Meanwhile, the Morgana Avarice took advantage of the relative quiet around the Finnish coast to see what treasure she might find. This has been WVBN from around the world.